Welcome to this virtual inauguration event of MAHTI supercomputer. Event was originally planned to be arranged in Kajaani, where you all could have participated physically in our data center tour and a physical ribbon cutting party in Kajaani, the data center area. Unfortunately, COVID-19 prevented this event, and now we are gathering here virtually. Still, I'm sure that this event will be very successful and entertaining. We start the day with greetings from Minister of Culture and Education, from CSC, and from the system vendors. After that, we hear 6 interesting presentations from the first users of the MAHTI supercomputer. You can ask questions from presenters in the questions and answers section. We try to give room for 1 or 2 questions after each presentation, but we have reserved more time in the end of the program. So I hope that most of the presenters can stay also online during the whole event. And because this is a virtual event, we couldn't send sparkling wine for all of you, but I hope you have something in hands when in the end of the event we raise the toast for the MAHTI. Let's hope it will bring some Nobel Prizes to Finland again during its lifetime. But without further delays, let's move forward with the program. Our first speaker is Erja Heikkinen. She's a Science Policy Director at Ministry of Culture and Education. Welcome, Erja.
Thank you so much, Pekka, and good morning, everybody. It's great to be here on behalf of the Ministry of Education and Culture, and maybe you wonder why the ministry is involved in all this. The reason is that the state of Finland owns CSC, and we are one of the owners, and we also traditionally have paid for the renewal of infrastructure environments at CSC. So the state owns the machines and CSC operates them. And it was 6 to 7 years ago that we faced again yet another round of renewing the national HPC environment, and we're in a situation where we had no funding in the higher education and research budget for this purpose, and there was no money anywhere to be seen in the horizon. And so we started to think that how can we manage this, because we needed a new environment for the researchers to manage their data and calculate their experiments in the infrastructure. And so the obvious solution was the Ministry of Finance, the Treasury of Finland, and they had a digitalization funding available for program type of activities. And we thought, okay, program type and infrastructure environment, how do these 2 purposes meet? And the first thing was that, okay, let's first ask the researcher community whether they wanted a similar environment as we had before, or is there something new that we should take into account? And let's see whether there are elements for a program type of approaching this issue. And the researchers raised the following aspects: the ever-growing importance of data management, computing in general, not just HPC, and artificial intelligence capabilities of the new system. And immediately we got excited about this development and started to find a way how to sell our ideas to the Ministry of Finance. And the solution was that we included all research institutes from other ministries' administrative branches into the user community of CSC services, which means that researchers from research institutes can now use CSC facilities, and this benefit will not be erased after the program type of activity is ended. So all public researchers, public research institution researchers can use CSC services now, not only those in higher education institutions. And this is a big change, and we look forward to having the results of this adventure in some years' time in our hands, so we can see the influence of higher education and science policy developments here. And with this program that the Ministry of Finance was kind enough to fund, we wanted to respond to these infrastructure needs that we got from the scientific community. We also wanted to enhance collaboration between different types of research performing organizations, like universities, research institutes, the private sector, bigger industries. And we also wanted to give a chance for not that traditional high performance computing audience to use the facilities. So disciplines that were not typical users of CSC facilities are now very welcomed into the into the community and to use the system, and they have done that. We also have an urgent need to develop national competencies in scientific computing, not only among those that are obvious targets, but among all researcher communities in all disciplines, and also in education, in higher education. And of course, we have to be able to serve as a stepping stone towards the European research infrastructures, not only those in high performance computing, but in infrastructures in general. Well, we are lucky enough that the State Council of Finland, so the government, has decided on the national roadmap for research development and innovation, and we now do have a full political support needed to pursue these computational and digital and data-related issues as for research and innovation and higher education. And these science policy goals in some format will most probably be involved in the Recovery and Resilience Facility Plan of Finland in the EU context. That was decided on this whole exercise for Europe was decided by the heads of states in July. And Finland is one of those countries that is writing a program for this purpose. We know that not all countries are, but we do write. And computing, the importance of data, the importance of open approaches to research and innovation activities, as well as new emerging technologies like quantum, will most probably be in the center of the Finnish plan, especially given that Finland in the European semester procedure is expected, first of all, to increase its research and development funding, but also to increase the activities around research infrastructures and infrastructures in general, which means also roads and bridges. But we, of course, in the Ministry of Education and Culture want to emphasize the importance of research infrastructures. Well, the program that we are today talking about, so renewing the CSC's infrastructure environment, as well as the services provided, and increasing capabilities of the researcher community to use these infrastructures, has been pretty fruitful from the point of view of the State Council. So the government probably will be very happy when they hear that already now, when we are celebrating the finalization of the environment, we see a positive trend in user numbers with the program. For example, the users from the government research institutes are now seen there clearly as a new emerging customer group. Also that the research institutes have invested themselves into these infrastructure, so they have to be able to use these infras, and this means that they also have internally make renewals is good news. Also, that artificial intelligence research and research utilizing these methodologies have become more prominent in the Finnish researcher community. And of course, this infrastructure is already to be seen to contribute to research excellence and international research. We, for example, have exciting examples of ERC-funded projects, flagship initiatives, and centers of excellence research projects that are carried out in this new environment. Very timely is the fact that this new environment was it enabled responding swiftly to the acute research need created by the COVID-19 pandemic, and it was a very encouraging example of a broader societal impact of computational science that we experienced through this exercise that CSC very swiftly took on board when we realized that something has to be done to enable research resources redirection towards the pandemic in each and every of European countries and also more globally. And talking about the global perspective and what's good for Europe, the national investment and CSC's capabilities and good work have enabled us to serve as a stepping stone towards, for example, European high-performance computing developments and future investments. And we are very proud to be LUMI Euro HPC hosting country for the 10-country consortium that Finland is in charge of. And this consortium is a very strong player in the European scene, together with all the other Euro HPC pre-exascale and petascale computer experiments that are ongoing elsewhere in Europe. But I guess that it's clear for everyone there that it's not as civil servants that can make these brand new environments to flourish, but it's the scientific community with its creativity that continues from here towards different kinds of scientific adventures. And it's my pleasure on behalf of the Ministry of Education and Culture to thank all the experts at CSC and the expertise you share and have and flourish. You have really hard work behind you, but there's more work in the future to be done, and we have to be able to do that together. And it's not us here only not us in Finland that trust your competencies at CSC. The Europe is looking at you with this Euro HPC exercise, and we have to be able to serve also those that are not as strong as we now are in high-performing computing in general and in data management facilities. And I hope that we will remember this day later when things develop and we are not surrendering to this situation where we are now. I hope that when we are in a similar situation with Euro HPC, so celebrating the environment to be ready to take to hard usage, we can see each other clearly and truly be in the same room. It's much easier to interact when we see each other. But hey, congratulations to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Erja.
Yes.
Are there any questions raised after the areas enlightening talk. I don't know if you area can stay online longer, but if no questions are now raised, we will deliver those to ministry later if those arise. But now our second speaker is CSC's Managing Director Kimmo Koski. Please, Kimmo.
Okay, thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here. And well, we have been working together very hard to get to this point, but now finally we are here. And join with computer 8 audio.
Don't touch audio.
Okay, some technical stuff, of course, video conferencing. So we have been working very hard to get here, and I would very much like to thank all of you involved here, our collaborators and the vendor side, Atos, AMD, DDN and Mellanox, of course, also our personnel at CSC who have been working greatly together with the good experts of the vendor side, ministry, of course, for all the support, and last but definitely not least, for you user communities and users who have been helping us to get that far. And these pilot projects in the end of the seminar, latter half of the seminar, which have been described, are very, very good examples of those. And we already now know that the performance, for example, of these new systems is extremely good. So expectations have been met in that side. So it's really a pleasure to be here, and looking forwards for this collaboration to build this data computing ecosystem here in Finland. And so a couple of words first about these Joni, maybe you can switch them. Yeah.
Click it.
Click it, yeah.
Nolla eteenpäin.
Yeah. Oh,
I can do.
okay. Now we got it. Yeah, there's the arrow doesn't work actually. So okay. So sorry about these small technical details, and I think that might not have been the last one, but let's see. So anyway, here is what we got now here. It's a final stage of this collaboration, or this contract we made with Atos or almost 2 years ago. And like today, usually the supercomputers, they are coming in phases, because they has to be put to this roadmap. Roadmap and technical development is fast. So in order to achieve something like 5 years lifetime, we need to do this usually in stages. And this is now the final phase of our current collaboration. And I would say that the top end machine of this contract is actually even exceeded the expectations in that sense of the performance. I mean, at the moment we are the 14th fastest supercomputer in Europe, which is in a country like Finland. Size of the Finland is extremely good, and 40th in the world. But I mean, most of all, it's important that now we also have a workhorse for the most demanding parallel jobs. So the previous installations have been covering mostly some other areas of high performance computing ecosystem, from artificial intelligence platforms to let's say the distributed type of computing, or not distributed, but the next level parallel computing. And now we have the peak computing system available here. Well, I mean, almost 180,000 AMD CPU cores, and this is already quite quite impressive. And this also sets one thing that one needs to remember here, that now we have here machine, but I mean, that's not of course enough, because we need the people to be able to use it, and we use applications and software that can benefit from the parallel computing capabilities. And in Finland, that is, I would say that the situation is probably much better than average country, because we have a long tradition in supercomputing, providing these services already from 1980s, and also long tradition of users of tuning the codes together with, for example, our people. Okay, and some points about this MAHTI installation. So I already mentioned that this is usually done for several years ahead, for the longer period than just lifetime of one single machine. And now what we also are trying to do here is because supercomputing used to be pretty much related to number crunching only, and now actually we are not anymore talking about supercomputing in that sense, but we are talking about data computing environment with some AI and machine learning flavor. So the environments are the combination of different resources, and the idea is that the resources are different tasks sometimes require different solutions, and now we are able, after this MAHTI inauguration, we are able to offer the whole portfolio of these solutions to our users, from the high-end computing to this AI and lower or more distributed computing area. And one of the reasons why I predict that this is a very big success, and it will be also something that will be extended sooner or later, this area, or let's say the data center environment in Kajaani, which is extremely good in many ways, not only for cost efficiency and space and electricity connections that are available there, but also for extremely good efficiency in this. We talk about Green Deal a lot, but here in this case, first of all, the use of electricity for example, cooling is in minimum, and later we also expect that we will use the excess heat to warm the houses in Kajaani at the same time that will be doing in this Euro HPC platform, and that actually makes the carbon footprint in this area practically negative, because we will save more fossil fuel burning electricity than we get from this excess heat, for example. So for the future developments and future projects, there is a lot of space in Kajaani, and I would be surprised if MAHTI would not be having some other activities around this, and this is definitely our goal, to build an ecosystem around the MAHTI computing. Okay, and green list, we are in number 44, and there are only 14 faster than MAHTI system, but I mean, this will hopefully even improve in the future. And in this pilot project, experience was also very positive and different from the previous generations. Now it is possible to use get a very high utilization of these computers, even though you are talking about 180,000 cores, etc. So this the way we run it here together with our technology people and the vendors, collaborating vendors, I think we will be able to achieve a very high utilization rate also in the future. Okay, so I'm coming to the end of this greeting, and I would just like to remind that okay, so MAHTI is now the last part of the Atos family, Atos CSC family, and so we already running Puhti and this AI portfolio and the data lake in Allas. So now this combination is completed, and we can start to have benefits of the extremely good environment for the Finnish research. And to finish this, first of all, I already made notes about thanking, and I would still like to repeat thanking everybody involved. This is a great achievement, and together we have been doing this, and your involvement has been very crucial. Everybody actually has been participating in these large projects in one way or another, and here is it's kind of one slide from it's kind of a try to cope one slide the main topics and main things about what we need to know from CSC, and I would like to raise one word from here especially, which fits to this event and this achievement, is this together. So together we build the world-class environments for research, learning and innovation, and now this collaboration with Atos bringing this MAHTI and the other parts of the ecosystem is an extremely good example of something that serves for this purpose especially. So thank you very much, and I wish you all very innovative and interesting rest of the seminar. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimmo. Are there any questions in audience for Kimmo? Not at the moment. That's a bit of the downside of these virtual conferences, that it's not that easy to ask questions as in physical events.
We forgot to agree those in advance. I mean, you should have asked some questions from me, and I asked from you. You know,
that we on purpose didn't do. But okay, thank you, Kimmo. And now we move forward with system vendors speeches for the MAHTI. And the next speaker is Agnes Pudor. She's a senior vice president and the head of the HPC and quantum computing at Atos. Please, Agnes.
Thank you very much, Pekka. Just let me share my screen. Here we go. Thanks a lot for this introduction, and really I'm absolutely happy to be with you. Unfortunately, just on the phone, on the video, but really happy. And just to go back to this story that was highlighted by Kimmo previously. I mean, last year we were together for the inauguration of PUTI and ALAS in Kajaani, a great event, and it was really interesting for us to share with the users. This step now is to share with you where we are on this second big step with the MAHTI installation based on our Atos Bulk-Sequana H2000. The latest generation of the supercomputer that we've put on the market, fully direct liquid cooling technology. The full design of this machine is made in France, in Europe, and is built and assembled in our factory in Angers, France, Loire-Vallée. And I mean, we've been able through that program to put on the market the latest and best technology available on the market for HPC and AI. Just to go back to this full range of solutions that we've provided to you. In fact, we tried and we managed, I guess, to answer to your technical requirements, and the challenge was really high, as usual with CSC team, because you're really experts at CSC in this supercomputing environment, and much more than just computing, crashing data, and so on, really managing the full workflow. And as you spoke about earlier, managing HPC, managing AI, data management, data processing, high speed transfer of data, and so on. We manage through the procurement to answer and to work on all the application workloads. And remember, 2 years before this installation, we were not having, of course, all the technology that we have built with for this supercomputer. But we managed to make some projections and knowing about the future of what we would deliver. And we were working on real applications for sure. The environment for real workflow and production is different, is much further in the space of exploring things, but I think we have demonstrated through this delivery that we could reach what was the targets for the supercomputer itself, and more than that for the usage of these applications for the science community. So basically what we have delivered is a supercomputer system. As I said, you mentioned 180,000 cores, all these distributed in some blades and nodes, and all that based on the AMD technology, latest generation of AMD EPIC processor. It's really, I mean, every element in that supercomputer were really tuned to be at the highest level in terms of performance. So you should get from the application really the best of what is available on the market, a very powerful CPU running to 8 watts. And this means that we had to design really and to push the limit of what was available in other technology today in terms of water cooling, in terms of high efficiency in the power consumption, and with the goal to be really as green as possible, as mentioned earlier. All this is based also on the latest technology from Linux, HGR interconnect, 200 gigabit per second, and a very important partner as well for us was DDN for the storage, with an overall capacity around 7 petabytes and 90 gigabytes per second as a whole for the transfer. All these are numbers, but what is important is to be able to make the whole thing working. It was a big challenge, technology challenge, to put this on the market. So we were first to put this type of technology on the market. We were able to put with your team the system. It's now 47 and not 488, as I could see it previously. I think somebody just escaped from the June list. And I mean, I want to highlight that all this needs also, for sure, a software environment that enables the users to take benefits of the whole thing. This is coupled with other elements, and what elements that were installed previously in the previous phases, as mentioned 1 year earlier. Again, I want to highlight the partnership with our main partner, AMD, Mellanox, and GDN. A great partnership to reach the level of the tool that you have in hands to produce science. Of course, there were some few difficulties at the beginning, as usual when we put on the market new technology. I think we have stabilized most of the environments, and thanks to the great work with the CRC team, I think you have now a really great tool for exploring HPC calculation, computation, and so on. Again, what is Atos' work and how do we see the future? We want to continue working on efficiency at all levels, and to work on the usability of large HPC system. We'll be with you for the next years to help on these systems on any areas, application support, or let's say enhanced feature that we could have on the hardware or software. From what has been delivered, we are working and we are getting ready for exascale as very few other actors. We are doing our research in Europe, as you know, and we are building things. We are just, I mean, for the last 15 years, focused absolutely on this target to really bring this technology within Europe. And we are working very intensively also for the future on quantum computing, and we hope to have development on this subject with CSC and with the Finnish environment and community of users, because we do believe this will be definitely part of the future. To finish, I want to highlight the high quality of the CSC team, very experienced team, our partner in that that deal. I want to thank, of course, all my team, all the Atos people behind the scene, the one working with you daily, but all the people behind that have made that program possible. These designs, the system you have now for running was designed 2-3 years ago, and it came to life with such installation. So thanks again. We are looking really to hear from the CSC user community. We need to learn what is going well, what needs still to be improved. It will benefit for all your science and future project as well. We are all learning together from what the application can get from all these systems. So long life to MAHTI, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Agnes, for your nice words. It's been a really interesting 2 years journey together with others to build one of the kind future science ecosystem in computing and data management with you. There have been, as you mentioned, a couple of challenges, but I think we are now solved those, and we are looking for the fruitful collaboration for years to come. Any questions on audience for Agnes? No. So then we move forward with vendor greetings.
Oh, maybe so.
Okay, Kimmo, please.
So just not really a question, but it's Kimmo here. So just to greet you, and I would also like to know, almost face to face, thank you for your team for the great effort that we have been working together to get this done, and now it really looks for the bright future. So thank you very much, and take care there in France.
Thanks, Kimmo. It will be a pleasure to visit you again once we can all travel. Yeah, we want to be close to users and to you to help get the best of these machines. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. So our next speaker is Mario Silveira. He's Vice President at EMEA area in AMD. And as we know, the AMD CPUs are the stones of the MAHTI system. Please, Mario.
Thank you. Thanks so much. There we go. So good morning, good day to everybody. Thank you once again for having the opportunity to join in such a wonderful moment of launching, of having basically the inauguration of MAHTI. We're truly proud and honored to be part of such a moment. Would like to really extend my greetings out to all in Kajaani and basically all around the globe joining us here today. And I want to thank specifically you yourself, Kimmo, Pekka, and Sebastian for all your support as we were building and collaborating to build MAHTI together. Taking a look at what MAHTI signifies for us at AMD, MAHTI truly is a proof and an example of great partnership and collaboration across Europe. It is clearly a point where the mindset and the passion to drive towards a solution that is scalable, powerful, and also very security focused in its architecture has come together and has been really created as a tool for the scientists and for the students out there addressing and tackling some of the toughest challenges that are out there today, and maybe some of the most interesting challenges. AMD is truly committed in supporting the whole community of HPC and drive teamwork and a collaboration that goes far beyond of only having such great moments as an inauguration, but we're truly committed in providing technology, leading edge technology that actually changes the world. And we do believe that with this spearhead of thought leadership and solution in Finland, we truly believe this is a great example of what can be done when brilliant minds come together and join forces. So a big thank you for that. Now, as we are one small part of the total solution at AMD, we understand, we acknowledge that. Nonetheless, we actually look at the value that we bring to you and the researchers around the world is something that is built on leadership and is built on responsibility towards solving some of these tough problems. It was mentioned before that clearly COVID research, molecular dynamics, weather patterns can be analyzed and can be analyzed at a speed that I think is 3 times faster with a higher power efficiency than the previous generation. This is something where we at AMD are truly proud of. And we really want to underline our commitment and support to the CSE team in continuing to build. For us, one of the key points here also is that when we take a look at how our world is evolving, we truly believe that MAHTI and the researchers utilizing MAHTI will bring more certainty, more knowledge into the world, where I think today we have got more uncertainty than potentially ever before on a global scale. So a big thank you there, not just to the CSE team that has been wonderful in supporting us, not just to the Ministry of Culture and Education with area really supporting the vision that the CSE team had, but also to our friends and partners from Atos, Agnes, and also to Life from Mellanox, but also our friends from DDN, who have really enabled us with their worldwide leading solutions and capabilities to take MAHTI to the level where it is today. So with heartfelt greetings and warm regards from AMD and the AMD family, we just want to say thank you and give our greetings to all of you to stay well and stay safe as our world is joining forces in solving these problems together, and MAHTI being one of the key focus points to rally around. So big thank you from us, and over back to you.
Thank you, Maria, for the kind words. It's been really efficient CPU, as we already seen. It's been easily utilized by the scientists, and if there's no questions for Mario, I think this is also a good point to move in the program to start hearing the real experiences of using the systems and what kind of breakthrough science it has already enabled. So our first presenter on use cases is Dr. Miguel Caro. He's a research fellow at the Department of Electrical Engineering and Automation on Aalto University. Please, Miguel.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pekka. So I'm going to start sharing my screen now. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes, okay. Yeah, so again, thank you very much. Just going to try, yeah, I'm going to enable these. Yes, so as you know, we've been pilot testing MAHTI for the past couple of months. Well, now it's in production stage. And we also were pilot testing PuhTi last year. And what I'm going to talk to you about is how we've used MAHTI for our materials modeling simulations. So we specialize in materials modeling using interatomic potentials and very much putting the focus on machine learning based interatomic potentials. So we have three projects, or three main projects, that can benefit from the new computing power that we can obtain from MAHTI and also from PUHTI. So one of them is on carbon nanotube growth. So the growth of carbon nanotube is not well understood. And we want to run large-scale molecular dynamic simulations of the nucleation, how the metal catalyst particles initiate the growth of these structures. Another project that we have, and for which we have already used MAHTI, is on the discovery of new catalysts for the carbon dioxide reduction reaction. So this is very important because it's a way to get the CO2 from the atmosphere and then turn it back into fuels. And the focus of our research is on finding catalysts, nanoparticles. So in this case, it's metal nanoparticles that can accelerate this reaction. And then we have another project on cellulose pyrolysis. So cellulose is very important for the Finnish economy, and it's used, for example, to produce carbon microfibers. And what we want to understand through this project is the very complex chemistry of cellulose pyrolysis. So how you can turn cellulose into microfibers. It's an extremely complicated chemistry, and we really need top-end computing resources to tackle this kind of problem. So just to give you a bit of background on what these interatomic potentials are. So here you have the trade-off between CPU cost and accuracy for a simulation that is aiming at telling you how atoms are interacting in matter. So you have quantum mechanics here. So it's very expensive, but very accurate and very flexible. And then you have classical potentials that are used very commonly in computational biology and so on. So they are very cheap, but they're not very accurate, and especially they're not very flexible. So they're very bad for handling bond breaking and bond formation. So ideally, we want something that is very cheap and very accurate. And in practice, we can get almost there with these new machine learning potentials. And I'm just going to explain to you what this means. So a machine learning potential is a set of mathematical functions and algorithms that allow you to predict the quantum mechanical potential energy surface. So that's the energy and forces of interacting atoms. Of course, the machine learning doesn't know anything about the laws of physics. So what you need to do is you need to teach the laws of physics to the potential. So for that, the first thing that you need to do is you need to construct a reference database. And to construct your reference database, you need to use a quantum mechanical method. So that's expensive. And then you need to add a representation of atomic environments. So essentially, you turn a set of atoms into a bunch of numbers. And then you use that information to teach the machine learning potential what the quantum mechanical energies and forces look like. So the flexibility that CSC offers in terms of having both MAHTI and PUHTI is very useful for us here because these tasks are very different. So here, when we do the quantum mechanical calculations, we will most often be using MAHTI because we need lots of CPU power. But then one of the bottlenecks for actually training the potential is the heavy use of memory. So for that, PUHTI is actually very useful. So it's really great that we have this kind of very flexible environment available to us. And this is the particular flavor of interatomic potential that we use, which is a kernel-based method. There are also artificial neural network potentials. So here you can see some performance results that we got from the MAHTI pilot phase. And this is very interesting to us, that because each compute node on MAHTI packs so many cores, and the communication is so fast, then we can really try to look down to the algorithm level at how to optimize the computation versus communication in our codes. So you can either run in a shared memory with a shared memory level of parallelism. You can distribute the memory, or you can combine both. And this is what's very interesting. So for this particular benchmark test, so this molecular dynamic simulation, you would usually run MPI calculation. So this distributed memory, each CPU has its own memory, and it doesn't share that with any other CPU. And then you would be at this level, so this time. Now, if we explore a combined parallelism where some of the cores are actually sharing some of the memory, then you can see that we can get down here. So this is 3 times faster than, say, the lazy way to explore parallelism in this case. So what this is telling us is that by going down to our code and profiling our algorithms and the workflows, we can actually speed up our simulation significantly. These are some results for the CO2 reduction project. These results are from MAHTI actually, and they have been obtained by Jan Kloppenburg, who's a postdoc in my group. What I'm showing here is the relative stability of different platinum nanoparticles. Okay, so these are the kind of catalysts that we can, or we want to use to turn CO2 into fuels. And you can see that we get the trends for our machine learning potential. That's the green line. In comparison with the quantum mechanical simulation, the trends are almost exactly the same. And this is an old graph. I mean, old is like a couple of weeks old. So now the agreement is even better, because Jan has managed to train an even better potential. But the main point here is not even the very good agreement in terms of accuracy, but it's also the incredible speed up that you can obtain. So for example, for this particular nanocluster, if you want to do a quantum mechanical calculation, it takes you 40,000 seconds. Now, if you do this with our machine learning potential, it takes you, so you cannot see it because of the scale, but this takes less than 1 second. So it's milliseconds. And you get essentially the same level of description. So we're very happy about these results. And of course, MAHTI was instrumental in being able to train this machine learning potential because you need to generate a lot of reference training data for this. Yeah, so essentially with such a cheap machine learning potential, now we can screen through possible catalyst nanoparticles many times. I wrote thousands, but it's actually faster. Thousands of times faster than with quantum mechanics. And then after this, we're going to focus on copper and copper alloy potentials. And that's even more challenging, because when you start to combine different atomic species, then your compositional space grows very fast. And that means that we need to generate even more reference data. And we're going to be using MAHTI for that. Then another thing that we've been looking at is massive scale molecular dynamics at close to quantum mechanic accuracy. So this is a slice through a 1 million atom glassy carbon structure that we generated using CSC. And the main point here is that we really need to go this big, because these are disorder structures, and the only way to capture disorder is by having a very large system. So glassy carbon and this kind of porous and low density carbons are very interesting for many applications, for example, in energy storage, because as you can see, there are lots of pores in between the graphitic layers, and then you can fill those pores with, for example, molten salt and alkali atoms, metals, and so on. So to get the structure of these materials is extremely crucial to be able to describe what's going on. And to get a representative distribution of the structure, then you really need this very large scale simulation. So you can see how we made this computational model of the structure from some molten carbon. This is liquid carbon, and then we ran a simulation. So, this is called a graphitization simulation on CSC, and then we end up with the structure that you saw before. So this simulation is 10 times bigger than the previous record holder for this this type of machine learning intraatomic potentials, and this has been possible because of the computing power that we obtain from CSC. So now I just want to thank the people involved in the project. So Suresh is working on carbon nanotubes. Heikki is looking at van der Waals interactions. Jan, you saw some of his results. He's working on CO2 catalysis. And Patricia, she's working at the algorithm level, trying to improve the speed and accuracy of these potentials. And Mikhail is working on the cellulose project. I also would like to thank the Academy of Finland. So they're funding all of us, and of course I want to thank CSC in particular for providing the CPU time, but also now that some important people are listening, I also want to thank CSC for human time, which is a lot more valuable than CPU time. And CSC, besides world-class computing resources, they also provide world-class support. And also the application for CSC compute time is extremely lightweight compared to essentially everywhere else in Europe. So that actually allows us to spend less time trying to get the CPU time and more time using the CPU time and turning it into new science. So yeah, thank you for all of that. And I think I'm done with my presentation. I don't know if there will be some time for questions, or can you let me know if there are any questions?
And thank you, Miguel. We are a bit over time, but not that much. It was really nice to hear that you have been able to utilize the whole DL environment, and that's kind of the one application area where we see that these traditional HPC simulations and then the machine learning will meet even larger scale in many areas. But really interesting presentation and kind words. Are there any questions in audience for Miguel? If no, there's also time to ask those later. Right at any point to the questions and answers part, and then we check if there are any before we start celebration. So thank you, Miguel.
Thank you. Bye.
And our next speaker is Dr. Vivek Sharma. He's academic research fellow and docent at Department of Physics in University of Helsinki. Please, Vivek.
Thank you very much. I will share the screen now. Can you see it? I assume you can. Okay, so thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity. And I would also like to congratulate CSC on this great achievement of bringing these two fantastic machines to Finland and providing us opportunity to use these. So we have been able to test both of these, MAHTI and MAHTI. I will present some of the data also from the last stress test as well as last grand challenge, pilot grand challenge projects, but very briefly also about the MAHTI. So I'm going to move a little bit now from materials a little bit to the biology side, and we'll discuss like how can we use this high performance supercomputing in biological sciences and study some of the very fundamental processes like respiration, which gives energy to all the organisms, or photosynthesis as it takes place in the plants. We will focus on these very subtle chemical reactions, as well as their medical aspects, for instance. So in this slide, what I'm displaying is a number of protein crystal structures that have been sold by very expensive and also time-consuming experimental techniques, such as X-ray protein crystallography or cryo-EM. The first structure shown here is a bacterial photosynthetic reaction center. It's very important. It's able to capture light and then convert it into the energy. The next one is ATP synthase. It's present in all of us. It's doing its job now as I speak. It's a molecular turbine. It's a nanoturbine. It rotates something like 1,000 times per second, and it generates ATP, which is a very important molecule in biology. Another example is this potassium channel. This is also very important for many neuronal functions. So if there are mutations in it or some malfunction, I mean, we tend to get diseases because of that. Another example is this last one called GPCR. I would say almost 50% of the drugs available in the market at the moment, they bind to this target, and they do their job in mitigating the diseases. So these are wonderful structures, very high resolution protein structures, and they have given beautiful insights about their architecture. Also, we have learned about their mechanisms, and this also gave idea like how we can replicate these things by man-made systems, for example, artificial enzymes, drug design, etc., etc. But we still do not understand how these machines work. Why? One of the reasons is that there is no dynamics in the structural data. These structural data that comes from these very expensive techniques, I mean, one of the key component that missing is actually the dynamics, how they move, as shown in this cartoon on the right side. But we know all these biomolecules, they move constantly. They are doing their job by moving. For example, one of the best example is how a protein folds from its unfolded state, which is non-functional state, to a native state, which is a functional state. It moves, it dynamically changes, it crosses certain energy barriers, eventually ends up into the functional state. So this dynamics is very, very important to understand the enzyme mechanism and use that technology for other translational sciences. So this brings to this very famous quote by Richard Feynman that everything that living things do can be understood in terms of jigglings and wigglings of atoms. So the question is how to get this jigglings and wigglings of atoms. Well, luckily we have a very nice physics-based modeling and simulation technique called molecular dynamic simulations, as very briefly pointed out by the previous speaker. And here we are solving Newton's equation of motion as shown here, and you get a time evolution of the system, as you will see in a more detail. And to perform this, you really need some high performance supercomputers, definitely not the one which is shown in this picture below. Why do we need these big supercomputers? Is because these molecules are very, very complex. The model systems are very large, as you also saw in the previous, and I will also show you also in a minute, that these clusters of atoms, which can range up to millions of atoms in a single system, simulating those to understand how they move, what kind of dynamics is very, very slow on any of those computers. So you really need to focus on the high performance supercomputing platform as provided by MAHTI and MAHTI. And you will see in a moment how fantastic job they do. So this is precisely what we did by the computing time awarded to us. And we studied actually one of the very important enzymes in our body. This is called respiratory complex 1. Its structure is kind of this L-shaped structure. It has an electrical wire through which the currents flow in the form of negatively charged electrons. And what it does, it reduces one substrate molecule, which we call quinone, and uses that free energy to pump protons across the membrane, as you see. So these are positively charged, these are negatively charged, and they interact at a scale of 20 nanometers, which is a remarkable level of coupling. The question is, how does it happen? This is what we would like to understand. Another important aspect of this enzyme is that this is biomedically very relevant. A number of mutations happen, and they can cause different kind of mitochondrial diseases. So there are two dual focus here in terms of like to understand how the bioenergy is produced and also its medical relevance. We constructed really large model systems of this enzyme. As you can see here, the enzyme is the protein sitting in a biomembrane, which is very similar to what we have in the body here, and a solvent box around. We constructed these large model systems of 1.3 million atoms, and then performed really long time scale simulations. I would say that this would not have been possible without the level of computing we have here in Finland, for example, as come from MAHTI, and also including some of the PRAISE resources. And that's why we were able to simulate these large scales model systems and publish some of our work in very widely read journals, just such as Science Advances. So we performed these simulations, and what we learn are some of the really nice insights, as you can see here in this video. When you perform the MD simulations, we start from a completely dry protein, but as the time progresses, water molecules, the tiny small water molecules, they start to populate the enzyme cavities, as you see here, the red spheres, which are populating the cavities. And these stabilize, as you can see in the plot next to it, and they form these proton transfer pathways through which we think that the protons, actually the quantum mechanical particles per se, can travel. These are fine details, but the most important thing to know here is that this kind of resolution, this kind of spatial temporal resolution is not possible from the experiments, and we only get it from the computer simulations, which we can perform in these really fantastic supercomputers which CSC provides us. Another example of this thing is how the substrate molecule can move. We observed, again, by doing really large scale 40 microseconds of MD simulations on this very, very large enzyme, that how a substrate molecules in microseconds, as you see in the video. And then as it moves into the enzyme, it populates certain binding sites. Lo and behold, all of these binding sites, which we predicted last year and the year before using the supercomputing resources, are now confirmed by the experiments. So this is the importance of computing methods, that you get really high resolution data, which is not available from the experimental science. Sometimes we do, but not always. But that was mainly about how the atoms jiggle and wiggle. But as I told you, there are quantum mechanical particles involved, like protons, electrons. How to treat these into these kind of systems. So what we did, we studied the hydration, protein hydration, as you see the water map here, which is shown here, and we studied how the protons can move on to these water wires, water molecules. And for that, we performed these multi-scale QMMM simulations. These kind of simulations, they cannot parallelize over many number of cores or nodes, but they need some really good processing power and also very good memory, as provided by, for example, MAHTI. So some of these calculations which we performed, they were only possible because of the very nice architecture MAHTI provides to study these multi-scale simulations. And in the video, you see, I mean, how these subtle protons move from one of the residue in the lower side of the panel to the above under the influence of some electron transfer. So these are the different kind of examples I wanted to mention, and that we have been able to achieve by using these supercomputers able to perform MD simulations or these kind of multi-scale simulations on really large protein complexes. So this brings to some of the key points which I enlist here before I end this very short presentation, that the computational approaches are really necessary to understand how these biomolecules function, and then also to translate this knowledge to some other fields, including artificial enzymes, drug design, etc., etc. And these complement the experiments. As I showed you, we use the structural biology data and convert it into some dynamic data to study how these molecules behave. Molecules are very complex. Model systems are very large, so we really can't use our desktop or like small or even decent type level of supercomputers. We really need massive computers, and MAHTI and MAHTI are ideal for these large-scale simulations. Here, in this plot, I very briefly provide a little bit information on our latest tests, which we performed on MAHTI by using GROMACS, which is a fantastic molecular dynamics simulation tool, and perform these stress tests or pilot tests on different model systems ranging from few 100,000 to up to 10 million. And the performance for the normal size systems, which is like, 500,000 or 1 million atoms, this was enormous. This is amazing, going all the way up to 200 nanoseconds per day. So this is a big improvement what we could achieve before. So I have to say that in this aspect, MAHTI supercomputer is really state of the art. I would say that a number of other projects we have been able to move forward now with the help of MAHTI. Some of the works are under review already, and we will report those very soon. So with this, actually, I think I'm more or less done with the presentation. I'm also probably in time. I would like to thank my group members, Marco, Oti, Amina, Jonathan, and Aino. They have done fantastic job on all these simulations and really great analysis. My collaborators, from which we actually receive all these unpublished structural data, and also the funding sources, Academy of Finland, and other foundations, including University of Helsinki, and very importantly, the computing time, the fantastic computing time provided by CSC, and also in a very easy manner, as the previous speaker pointed out. So with this, I would like to thank you again, CSC, for this opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you, Vivek. Very interesting presentation, and again, very pleased to hear that systems we have been building up here for you are such that they really can drive the science in the next generation of scaling the system size a couple of decades up. Are there any questions for Vivek in audience? We are running well ahead of schedule, so. But if no, thank you, Vivek. Very interesting. The next speaker will be Andrea Sand. She's a postdoc researcher at Department of Physics in the University of Helsinki. Please, Andrea.
Thank you. So, hopefully you can now see the screen. My project in the MAHTI pilot project was about electronic excitations in tungsten. This is an extension of much work that we've been doing earlier on CSC's previous resources. This is now taking things a definite step forward thanks to the computing power available. So the topic of the study is radiation effects in materials. On an atomic scale, which is what we study here in this project, we consider an impinging particle. It can be a neutron or an ion. This particle collides with an atom in a target material, and this can then set off a sequence of collisions. The size of the collision sequence depends on the energy, but eventually it results in the formation of defects. Eventually is on a time scale of nanoseconds in this atomistic scale. Now, this is the initial stage of radiation damage, and this initial stage is crucial for understanding the full radiation response of materials on a macroscopic scale. Now, in order to model a system such as the one that you see on the right here, we need many million atoms, about 10 million atoms, to contain the whole process within the simulation. This requires very efficient methods, and classical molecular dynamics is the method of choice. What this means is that typically for this type of study, quantum effects are completely disregarded due to the computational cost. However, in the radiation process, the electrons play a very important part. Energetic particles interact directly with electrons, and this is not captured in the classical MD model. This results, for one, in the projectiles deposit energy into the electronic system. This slows down the projectiles, but this also transfers energy to neighboring atoms in ways which are not captured by the classical interaction potentials that have been mentioned here earlier as well. So in order to include the electronic effects, we have to do this based on quantum mechanics. So we use what we call ab initio methods, building theoretically from the ground up. Now, theoretical models, which we could possibly describe efficiently, they do not capture electronic orbital structure effects. And these detailed structural effects, they're important, especially at lower energies. We can't treat the system as an average system. The individual orbitals really do play a part. This means that we have to approach this through a computational method, and that requires resource-heavy calculations. So it's already been mentioned here a couple of times, and I'll go through this rather quickly. The computational cost of these models. An electronic system can be described with density functional theory, and this can be quite efficiently parallelized over many cores. Often, the system size is restricted by available HPC resources. Now, if we want to do dynamics, we immediately have a trade-off between system size and simulated time. And the more we increase the level of accuracy, of course, the more this entails computational cost. So this work that I've been doing now, it involves dynamical electrons. So we actually have electrons that get excited dynamically in time as the radiation process evolves, and we can follow the evolution of these excited electrons through time. Now, this is incredibly computationally intensive, and that means that the systems that we can study are limited both in size and in time. But there's a crucial contrast to classical MD. In classical MD, we can, as it was mentioned, we can't parallelize, we can't split the atomic system into as many cores as we want. We need to model a certain number of atoms within one core because they all interact. So at some point, we don't get any added value by splitting it onto more cores. So we can already simulate rather massive systems in MD with the available computational power that we've had already for quite a few years. So these 10 million atom systems, they haven't been a problem for the past decade. However, time can't be directly parallelized. So time is often a limiting factor for these classical simulations. Now, when we go to the atomistic, to the ab initio scale, the quantum mechanical accuracy, things change. We model the electrons, and we can actually now parallelize the system to the point where we have one electron per core. So in classical MD, we sort of reach the limit when we have 1,000 atoms in one core. After that, there's not much point in splitting it onto more cores. But with the TD-DFT methods, when we can do one electron on one core, this means that for a 1,000 atom system, we could split it over. For example, in my work, I use 12 electrons for each atom. So this would mean I could split it easily on 12,000 cores. And this is what MAHTI makes possible. So what I've studied is relevant for the threshold displacement energy. That's the minimum energy for which a stable defect is created from an impinging particle. This is a key quantity in radiation damage predictions. The current state of the art in modeling the threshold displacement energy is using DFT in ground state, so no time dependence of electron excitations. while DFT is very powerful, this ground state approach misses the effects of the dynamics in the radiation event. So in this pilot project, I've done full ab initio calculations with time evolving electrons of recoils on the energy level around the expected threshold displacement energy in tungsten. The ultimate aim is to quantify the non-adiabatic, so effects that are caused by excitation of electrons in the predictions of TDE. And tungsten is a material of choice for this because it is relevant for the development of fusion energy. In short, the simulation evolves, as you see here, from left to right. We initiate a recoil. The relevant energy here is 50 electron volts. This recoil moves towards a full head-on collision with its nearest neighbor. During that collision, in picture number 3, it transfers energy in the head-on collision to the following atom. But as it does this, when it passes neighboring atoms, it also transfers energy to these atoms. Now, the neighboring atoms, their velocities are very small, but collectively over the whole region of this process, this is very important for determining whether or not a defect eventually is created that is stable or not. So from these calculations that I've done now during this pilot project, I have results for the time evolving electronic state. Now these will be eventually compared directly to ground state density functional theory work with the same initial conditions as it will be done with my collaborators at KTH in Sweden, so it's not done yet. But at this point, what I can look at is the difference in the forces that I find in the system from the evolved electronic density or evolved TD-DFT states compared to the forces that a ground state DFT electronic state gives us. And it turns out that at certain points in the evolution of this damage process, the forces are not only different in magnitude, but sometimes even different in direction. So this is expected to have a clear effect on the radiation damage process. In order to quantify it, we can't, even with the resources offered by MAHTI, we cannot do this, simulate this to the very end when we actually have a stable defect. So we have to pick up from the point where these simulations ends and continue with a higher approximation in order to reach the end. And at that point, we can say, has the initial dynamics affected the threshold displacement energy, and to what degree? These simulations with full dynamics in an evolving system for radiation damage are among the first of their kind. So they do set a precedence for including full dynamics in radiation effects. And this has an implication for a very wide range of phenomena. And in terms of the resources on MAHTI, I did scale the system up to over 12,000 cores with 1,000 atoms, but it is too heavy to take it very far within the resources granted so far. But technically, it's completely possible. It worked beautifully on MAHTI, but it would take much more resources. So in effect, MAHTI makes it possible, but I would use much of what would be available. Thank you, and many thanks to CSC for the resources for this project.
Thank you, Andrea. And I have one question. So you mentioned that scaling up would be even possible. Is it about getting more resources for your queue, so largest queues in a MAHTI, or is it something that also would need a kind of the specialist work?
No, actually, it wouldn't need anything other than about 10 times more resources than I applied for this pilot project. But because these are the first simulations of their kind, it's reasonable to do it at a slightly smaller scale first to optimize, for which we can't do it for 1,000 cases in any way. So with this, I can now look at what are the limits of the accuracy, for one thing, in this dynamic electronic system, because this type of work hasn't been done before. So this is one thing that I'll be looking at in detail, and then also where are the strongest effects and which cases would give us most value if we were to simulate them in a larger system, and then I'll get back to you.
Okay, and I'm happy to announce that we will be launching the Grand Challenge call in near future when bigger challenging can be tackled again with the MAHTI.
Yeah. Can I have a bit similar question to Pekka's, but just to understand. So the bottleneck in this is Kimmo here. So the bottleneck in enlarging the runs, is it more in this capacity, CPU capacity, or is it more in the application tuning work? Or understanding the problem could be the third one, I suppose. Yeah.
So the application scales very well, and on MAHTI technically it scales very well, and this is fully possible with a large level of resources. But there's little point in doing them without some groundwork to start off with to make reasonable choices in the simulations. But this is fully possible, and yeah, looking forward to applying for the Grand Challenge.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you.
Any questions on chat? No. And we have opened the chat also for all the presenters so that they can ask questions there more easily. Our next speaker is Professor Maarit Käpylä. She is the Associate Professor on Department of Computer Science, Astrophysics and Magnetohydrodynamics at Aalto University. Maarit, please.
Hello. And you can see my slides, okay? Well, I assume that you do. So many thanks for this opportunity to present our MAHTI pilot project, which deals with dynamo action and magnetic field generation in our own star, namely the Sun. Today I will, first of all, try to briefly explain to you why this kind of research is important, and then give you a brief overview what kind of results we could accomplish with this mighty MAHTI. So our Sun is a gigantic gas ball, but it's also a huge magnet. So in this outer region, outer 30% of its radius, there is conductive fluid, electrically conducting fluid, and the fluid motions in this region, which we call the convection zone, act as a source for the magnetic field. And because of the presence of the magnetic field, there are sunspots, other type of activity, magnetic activity manifestations like flares, prominences, coronal mass ejections that all originate from the magnetic field. And they make the Sun to erupt. So why should we care if the Sun erupts? Well, that is how the space weather and space climate is driven. This means that if there are a lot of eruptions on the Sun, then we will have bad space weather. On the nice side, we might then have nice northern lights to our enjoyment, but on the bad side, we have many bad effects, such as disruptions in communications, failure of power grids, and radiation hazards for human travel, be it on a plane or then on a space mission. And all this costs a lot of money for our society. So to be able to mitigate this, to be able to reduce the costs, we of course need to understand how the Sun drives the space weather, and this is directly linked to the solar dynamo mechanism. Unfortunately, the dynamo process that generates the magnetic fields is very, very poorly known, and it is very, very difficult to tackle. And I try to demonstrate you why that is by taking you to a space flight on a space observatory called Hinode, which is the highest resolution instrument, one of them, which is looking at the Sun nowadays. So from the distance, the Sun of course looks very harmless. It looks like a calm tennis ball. But when you go closer, this is no longer a case, and you can see a completely different story. So the solar surface is boiling and flickering and is in the state of intensive turbulence. This structure here is a sunspot. It's an intense concentration of a magnetic field, which can be a place of further eruption. And maybe you even saw in this animation some material erupting. The scale of these structures, which we call the granulation, which are the turbulence cells on the solar surface, is roughly 1,000 kilometers, and the resolution of the instrument is 100 kilometers. So it means that there is a lot of dynamics on the small scales occurring very fast. And what we normally call this is, of course, turbulence. But this turbulence occurs in very peculiar circumstances, in the extreme circumstances of the sun. And hence, there is no analytical approach or description of these turbulent motions in the sun. And we can overrule the analytical approach. Therefore, most and majority of studies where we can realistically investigate this phenomenon must rely on numerical modeling. But currently there is no numerical model existing that could capture and reproduce all the observed behavior that we see through these base instruments and ground-based instruments occurring on the sun. And why is this then? So the leading hypothesis, of course, is that the numerical models that we have been able to construct up to now are too far removed from the real conditions in the sun. So the parameters that we are able to discretize in our models and integrate the equations over is too modest. And with the help of this MAHTI pilot resources, we decided to put this hypothesis into a test. So we decided to make a model using the most accurate grid ever and try to see whether we can at least understand some parts of the processes of the generation of the magnetic field in these kind of simulations. Without going into any further details of these models, I just tell you that the best resolution used before was something like 1,000 cubed. And also in this case, it's not only the grid size, which is limiting our computation, but it's also how long we can integrate over time. Whenever we increase the resolution, our time step goes down. So making high resolution computations is extremely demanding because of the grid size, yeah, but also because of the integration time goes down. But with the MAHTI resources, we could set up simulations up to 4,000 cubed, and we were actually planning also 8,000 cubed, but we ran out of time to do this properly. But even with this 4,000 cubed simulations, we obtained quite remarkable results. So we do not model the whole sun, we just take a local volume of it. And in this three-dimensional volume, we then solve the magneto-hydrodynamic equation. So it's like fluid dynamics added with magnetic fields. And in this animation, I will show you the fluid velocity amplitude, meaning that the bright is here like large velocity and the dark patches are then lower velocities. And this is how the simulation looks. This is just a two-dimensional cut through the box, and we evolve it here as function of time. So you see here vertical structures, like a bit like in turbulence in water, and then extremely small structures and a lot of dynamics. And what we asked in this MAHTI pilot project is that can this fluid, this very highly turbulent fluid, now sustain dynamo action like the sun obviously does, or can it not? And now I try to illustrate to you the relevance of this MAHTI pilot project for this research. So I will show you this kind of a bit a difficult graph, but before MAHTI pilot and after the MAHTI pilot. So this slide is before the MAHTI pilot. This graph explains the possibility for dynamo action, red meaning that the dynamo action is detected, and green meaning that we do not see any dynamo action, and the white line being the division line between growing and decaying solutions. In this graph, the sun would be somewhere here outside of this plot to the upper right corner. So we are still far away, but closer thanks to the MAHTI pilot resources. So it seemed like with these 1,000 cube simulations that dynamo action based on these numerical models alone would not be possible in the sun, because this zero growth line was tending towards higher values when we increase the system parameters, meaning basically that the sun would not have a dynamo if we reached ever this corner. With the MAHTI pilot, we were able to add considerable amount of new points, mainly by increasing the fluid Reynolds number. And we found out that this trend is actually not continuing when you go towards the more realistic parameter regimes, meaning that this anticipation from the lower resolution models was wrong. The sun definitely will be able to exhibit dynamo action based on our new runs. So this was, of course, for us, a great breakthrough result. But I must say that this MAHTI pilot taught us also other things about HPC computing, because when you go to this kind of simulations like 4,000 cubed, you start encountering other challenges that you never even thought about when you were dealing with the smaller grid sizes. Like, for example, one single system state takes 4 terabytes of disk space. We had a lot of issues because of this kind of writing this kind of data to the disk exerts, of course, a lot of stress to the disk system. So even if you have perfect scaling, you might have some disk problems or storage issues. And the other thing was that the animation that I showed you is just two-dimensional animation, just a cut through the box. But how to make a 3D visualization out of this data, which is so big, is actually very, very demanding. So it can be that your data analysis scripts, which we, at least we do not develop so actively, the data analysis part takes now more time than your actual HPC computations. And this will be an issue in the exascale era, and at least we have to think a lot about it. Anyway, so with this, I want to also very warmly thank the MAHTI pilot project at CSC, who stayed with us and helped us during the month of July, when normal people usually are on holidays, which was the time when the MAHTI pilot started. So thank you, and I of course hope or welcome MAHTI very warmly and hope long life for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Marit. Very interesting presentation again, and I think one you raised here is really the amount of data the simulations produce, and the importance of visualizing that visualization of results of simulations and handling the data in system. That's something we've been partly trying to focus on DL environment, that it would be better suited for all large data sets. But probably something we, as you pointed out, in an exascale or pre-exascale time, we need to be even more attention to be able to really visualize the results of the complex simulations. Does anyone have any further questions for Marit? How far we are now understanding or simulating the actions on the observed actions on the surface of the sun? Did we move any closer?
Definitely, we have moved a lot closer, and I think we are at the verge of being able to start, well, trusting the models enough that we can actually issue predictions of active region formation, and then consequently also which ones of those can erupt or not. But this kind of work will always rely on modeling, because these observational infrastructures will never be accurate enough to give us enough information. So this, like, numerical models will always remain in the core and center part of this research. So there is a lot more work ahead, even if we are already achieving something here.
And can you also tell what is kind of the desired forecasting window for predicting when the magnetic storms hit the sun? So
Well,
how many hours we could wish for?
Yeah, obviously the current situation still is that running these models takes much more time than actually for the energetic particles to reach us. So if we would need to compute in that time, then it would be like in time limit of hours, which we can never do. But we can look for precursors that would give us more time window even to compute the model. For example, these simulations I showed you can tell you something about the subsurface structures, and you can use then some like seismic measurements from the sun to predict these things earlier. So this brute force way of computing whenever you see an active region emerging, I don't think this is the future path. It's looking for more clever ways of finding precursors where machine learning and big data analysis will become into a very big role.
Thank you, Mari. Very interesting. And moving forward in program, the next speaker is Dr. Robert Gladstone from University of Lapland and Geoscience Department. Please, Robert.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to assume that everyone can hear me okay and see the screen okay, and they'll tell me if they can't. So I'd like to talk briefly about simulating the uncertain future of the Antarctic ice sheet and its relevance for sea level rise. This is of global interest. And my colleagues are listed here. I see everyone else is thanking their colleagues at the end, but I don't have the names up on my last slide. So let me thank my colleagues right now. I'm working as part of a consortium that's funded by the Academy of Finland. It's based in 3 different institutes in the University of Helsinki, the University of Lapland, and also at CSC. And now it's actually quite an appropriate moment to come back to something someone said earlier, highlighting the word together. I think it was one of the directors of CSC mentioned that earlier today. I've worked with quite a few different HPC resources in quite a few different countries, and I've never worked in with a company that's quite so closely linked between the HPC resource and the science. My colleagues at CSC, they're not just running HPC machines, they're developing numerical analysis codes for that and actually actively involved in the science itself. I think that's beneficial. So a brief introduction to glaciology. We experience ice in an everyday way, and in Finland we experience more ice than most as a brittle, low friction solid. But in larger scales, ice flows and deforms like a viscous fluid. Glaciers are essentially rivers of ice. In the central picture here showing mountain glaciers, the dark line through the middle following from this rocky moraine, this indicates a flow line in this particular river of ice. We use code developed at CSC to simulate ice sheets. The ELMA code was, it's a multi-physics code using finite element methods that's been developed at CSC for quite some years. The glaciological extensions to that code are known as ELMA ice. And these are a result of an international community that's growing quite considerably. ELMA has been used for a number of different applications. For example, predicting where a particular crashed aeroplane would emerge from a glacier that crashed in the middle of the last century. This is a brief introduction to Antarctica itself from a computational glaciologist's perspective. What we're looking at here is model output. This is showing velocities The white colors indicate virtually stationary ice. The blue colors indicate ice that's flowing at speeds of several kilometers per year into the ocean. We're zooming in on the Pine Island Glacier. This is quite a famous glacier. You might have seen it in the news. It's one of the most rapidly retreating glaciers in Antarctica. The portion of it closest to the ocean is actually floating. This is several hundred meters of floating ice. We can now see the model mesh. This is the model mesh that we've used to simulate the whole of Antarctica on CSC machines. These were older simulations carried out on MAHTI. We've also got regional simulations that we're able to run at finer resolution. So now we can show the model mesh for our Pine Island Glacier only solution, in which we're able to achieve the kind of mesh resolution that gives us confidence in our projections. In principle, we can apply this resolution to the whole of Antarctica. This requires certain developments that have mostly been made and we're working on at the moment. A very brief overview of our scientific objectives. In the past few years, we've been working towards projections of the whole of Antarctic ice sheet and some specific studies of the Pine Island Glacier. This was to meet IPCC deadlines, although there are many improvements to be made on the work that we've done so far. We're currently improving various aspects of our modeling setup on MAHTI, in particular our optimization for basal processes and for viscosity, which I'll talk about in a minute. We're also working towards simulating the interactions between ice and ocean. What we aim to do in the future, possibly even on LUMI, this is not yet determined, is to make century scale projections of the Antarctic ice sheet contribution to global sea level through coupled simulations in which the interactions between ice and ocean are represented. Here's a brief look at some of the work that we've done in previous years. This was carried out on MAHTI. We're looking at the Pine Island Glacier again. The geometry of the bedrock is shown. The color scale indicates the basal resistance after one of our optimizations carried out on MAHTI. And these optimizations tune key parameters of the model with the aim of matching the surface velocities of the model to those observed from satellites. In particular, most of the motion of these fast-flowing glaciers occurs through sliding at the bed, and that's why estimating this basal shear stress is very important. That's something we were able to do previously. Here's another previous result that was recently published based on our simulations from last year. We've contributed to a global project to make projections of the Antarctic ice sheet. This is submitted in time to contribute to the next IPCC report, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change. All of these simulations, and these are predictions of the sea level contribution over the next century, all of these simulations are based on computer models that have a number of limitations, which I won't go into yet. The reason why some of them are negative and some of them are positive is because there are two competing effects for Antarctica. As the atmosphere warms, the amount of moisture that can be carried in the air and fall as snowfall over the continent increases, so the interior is thickening gradually. But as the oceans around the margins of Antarctica warm, they cause rapid thinning of the floating parts of the ice sheet, and that enables the grounded part of the ice sheet to speed up. And these are competing effects, and some of these models, you see, we can't even be sure what the net result is. So that was a couple of previous results. This is something I'm showing now that we've done on the MAHTI pilot project. This is another optimization. In this case, it's an optimization for a viscosity enhancement factor. The flow of ice, well, so the colors I indicate here, the orange colors indicate where our optimization tells us we need to have a much lower viscosity, that is a much more fluid flow of ice. The blue colors are the opposite, where the optimization provides a stiffer ice. Now what's happening here, I should mention, the black line is the grounded line. That's when the ice becomes floating on the ocean. So the ice is flowing from top to bottom in this sense. And this section of the ice is floating, it's several hundred meters thick. And these orange linear features that our optimization has determined are shear margins. If I put a satellite picture over there, you can start to get some intuitive idea of what's occurring in these shear margins. There's a lot of crevassing, a lot of broken ice. Let me show you a zoom in. So the actual processes happening here are fracture processes, and we're representing this fracturing as a softening in a continuum approach, which is obviously not the correct physics locally, but it gives us a good result on a larger scale. In particular, if we compare our model velocities to observational velocities. Now, on the left, this is satellite observed velocity with the pink colors showing speeds of 3 or 4 kilometers per year. In the middle, we show the model velocity after we'd carried out our optimization for the basal resistance. And as you can see, it shows generally the right sort of pattern, but it's unable to reproduce this kind of plug flow in the ice shelf because it's not able to give us these weakened shear margins at the edge of the fast flow. And on the right-hand side, we have the model velocity after the optimization that we'd carried out on the MAHTI pilot project, which gives a much better result, much better match to observed velocities. In fact, the cost penalty when we compare model to observed velocities is an order of magnitude smaller now than it was previously. Another thing that we've done on the MAHTI pilot project is to improve our temperature simulations of the Pine Island Glacier. On the left-hand side, we're looking at basal temperature, where the red colors mean that the temperature has reached the pressure melting point. The blue colors are from -10 to -20 degrees centigrade. And we don't have direct observations of the base of the Pine Island Glacier, but we do have good physical reasons to suspect that most of it should be at the pressure melting temperature. The white line across, if you can see it, is the location of this profile, which is also showing temperature on the same color scale. And we figured out the problem with our previous temperature simulations was related to the normal velocity at the surface, which we've been able to control for on recent simulations. And on the right, we now have the temperature distribution that we've simulated this summer on the MAHTI pilot project, which is physically, it makes a lot more sense. It's not something that can be directly verified with observations, but it does give us increased confidence. We're also carrying out ocean simulations. This is our colleagues in Helsinki. They're aiming to carry out investigations of the heat budget in the Southern Ocean as a preliminary work. This is what they've already carried out on the MAHTI pilot project. And over the next year or two, we're working towards, as I mentioned earlier, fully coupled simulations between the Antarctic ice sheet and the Southern Ocean. There are technical issues to deal with as well as the scientific outcomes. We've been working on coding up a framework for coupling ice sheet and ocean computer models. And my colleagues at CSC have been working on improving the software so that it can better interact with modern hardware. Here's just a view of an idealized simulation that we've carried out using the Elmer ice model for the ice dynamics, coupled to a regional ocean model. The green area is the grounded ice sheet, and the color scale you see at the bottom is the predicted basal melt rate on the underside of the ice shelf, and this is calculated by the ocean model. And these are running coupled together in real time on MAHTI. The last two slides are on a topic that I have no expertise in. The Elmer model has recently been improved so that it can make more efficient use of vectorized processing units. This speeds up our simulations of ice flow. And if we want to use LUMI, then further work will be needed still in order to make sure that our software can run efficiently on the GPU hardware that's going to form the main part of LUMI. That's all I need to say for now, I think.
Thank you, Robert. Again, on very interesting and excellent example of the science done on the systems, how it varies on importance of different fields of modern challenges like the climate change and how much the fact-based data is needed for like intergovernmental panel of climate change that, as you told, the models are competing, and then it's great to see that we can really produce such a data to make our understanding of climate change better. Are there any questions for Rupert? Kimmo has some. Yeah.
Yeah, I have actually. I very much like the slide where you indicated that what are the next steps. I mean, what you can do with the MAHTI and MAHTI environment, and then how it goes with LUMI, etc. And I would actually encourage people to think about also further in the planning, because then it's quite likely that there will be the exascale era in couple of some three years from now, and then of course 2026 post exascale. And it will be very interesting. I mean, it would be very interesting for the discussion if the researchers would present the real life opportunities, that what are actually the reasons when we extend the capacity to the next level, that what we can get, what kind of results and impact we can get out of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimmo. Do you want to answer, Rupert?
Sorry, were you asking for something more for me? I thought it was an interesting.
Yeah, it was a comment, but if you have any view already now to share.
Well, just in briefly, I would say that our main obstacles at the moment are in developing the software to make the best use of the hardware that we have. I think that the processing power that MAHTI has already is more than enough to make huge advancements in the field of ice sheet modeling, so long as we can ensure that our software, that our ice sheet models is running efficiently on that hardware.
Yeah, thank you. But we can throw the same question also for our last speaker, who is Professor Karoliina Honkala, Vice Head of Department of Chemistry in University of Jyväskylä. Please, Karoliina.
Thank you. Let me share my slides first. Okay. I just need to find, I do have my slides open, but seem to have a problem to, now I found it. Thank you. Okay. So what me and my group, what we are interested in is to understand catalysis from computations, from different kind of computations. Mostly we do massive DFT calculations to unravel the electronic and atomic properties of the materials and reactions for different kind of catalytic systems like heterogeneous catalysis, but also electrocatalysis. And on top of these DFT calculations, we typically nowadays run also some kinetic simulations, which we carry out using our own softwares with workstations. That these DFT-based kinetic simulations, they really allow us to bridge the gap between the measurements carried out under operational reaction conditions and the DFT calculations, which are typically or are low zero temperature, zero pressure results simulations. In this MAHTI pilot project, we have been interested in the fluxionality property. So typical heterogeneous catalysts, they are metal nanoparticles supported on different kind of materials, for example, oxides or carbon or some other. So they are size of few nanometers, 2 to 5 or 7 nanometers. But clusters, they contain few atoms. They also might be can be supported on oxides, and they have a totally new and interesting range of properties to tune the catalytic activity and selectivity. And while these typical heterogeneous catalysts, they are more static, these clusters, they can exhibit different conformations when supported. And these 3 pictures on the left, they highlight different cluster structures. They all have 13 ruthenium atoms supported on zirconia, but they are slightly different. And now the question is that typically the calculations, they just select one cluster size and shape and use that one shape to explain the catalytic performance. And now this might be a bit too idealistic picture, and it actually might be that under realistic reaction conditions, you have several different shapes, cluster shapes, that can contribute to the activity in a different manner. And this figure on the right-hand side, this slightly demonstrates this issue. I mean, on top row, I show 3 different rhodium clusters, rhodium 13, 19, and 43. And on the bottom line, I show platinum 13, 19, and 43. And what I show with these bars for each of the clusters is the CO binding energy at the perimeter of a metal oxide interface. And as you can see, when we vary from one side to another, the CO binding energy, even in the one cluster, can change as much as 100 kilojoules per mole, for example, for platinum 13. And this is now for one platinum cluster shape only, in this case. 3 different sizes, but one shape only. Another question is that if we see such a large variation within one particle or one cluster shape, how large is this variation when we allow or consider different shapes, different cluster conformation? And this is at the core of the pilot project that's been running in MAHTI. So our methodology is that we do density functional theory-based molecular dynamic simulations, and we use LCAR basis set, and I have obviously forgotten to type the functional there, but we use a simple one, Walsh functional, and then Nose-Hoover thermostat. And all the calculations, they have been carried out using the GPO DFT software together with the ASE interface. And this picture on the bottom, it shows the example of the structures. It shows the rhodium 33 atom cluster supported on a zirconia oxide material, modeled with this kind of a thin slab model to represent the surface. And the pilot project, it builds on our previous CISU Grand Challenge project that we had a few years back, where we studied using density functional theory-based genetic algorithm search these rhodium and platinum clusters over zirconia support. And this picture here, it shows all the structures and the energies that we calculated in that project. And we have about the 10,000 structures, which we then ranked and found the most stable structure for each metal and the cluster size. And this plot of figure shows the most globally optimized, most stable structures for rhodium and platinum over this monoclinic zirconia surface. And with having either 13, 19, or 43 metal atoms. And you can see that the rhodium clusters, they look slightly different from platinum clusters. So rhodium prefers to have a compact, more spherical structure, whereas platinum prefers more irregular and a bit elongated shape over the zirconia. And these different structures and shapes, they originate from the fact that these clusters, these two metals, have different metal-metal interactions, and on the other hand, they have a different interaction with the support. So in the MAHTI pilot, we took these structures that are on the screen right now. They are our initial structures for molecular dynamics simulations. And since we have altogether around 10,000 structures, we did not look only these globally optimized, most stable structures, but we took another geometry, which is a bit higher in energy for each cluster and for both metals, and ran the MD simulations also from that structure. So altogether, we have studied about 22 molecular dynamic simulation runs for globally optimized structures, or the ones on this picture, and then these non-global structures. And we also included the effect of the adsorbate for one particular system. So for platinum-13, we add the CO, actually several CO molecules on top of the cluster to explore how the gas, in this case CO gas, if adsorbed on the surface, would affect to the dynamics of the cluster and the fluxual behavior. So here are some energy profiles. So in this presentation, I show the results for rhodium only, but we do have the similar data for platinum. And then for platinum-13, we also have data in the presence of CO. So 3 different cluster sizes, 13, 19, and 43. And then we've been running a lot of molecular dynamics, DFT-based molecular dynamics. And with the 13 and 19 atom systems, the target is to compute 20 picoseconds. So you can see that for rhodium-13, we have finished the molecular dynamics run, but for rhodium-19 cluster, we need to continue the run. We are not there quite yet. And for rhodium-43, we stopped at 15 picoseconds, because what we see is that at the temperature that we have considered, it's a bit above 500 K, as we found out, and not much is happening for rhodium-43, whereas a lot of things are happening for rhodium-13. And originally, we looked only the 13 and 43 atom clusters, but since 43 showed not much changes, so it was pretty static, we decided to also study the 19 atom cluster, because we have all the data from the CISU Grant Challenge project. So we had a very good guess for the initial structure to start with. And here is a simulation of our 13 atom cluster, how it changes during the time. So this is now 20 picoseconds that it's running, and in about 530 K temperature. And you can see that it's fluctuating there, it's changing a structure a bit, but it's not diffuse over the surface. And now that we have a lot of AMD data, the big question is then to understand the molecular dynamics trajectories and to understand specifically the structure. And we have started to analyze the data. And the first thing we did is to use a so-called Steinhardt parameter analysis. And this is typically used to analyze the local atomic environment for solid and amorphous materials. And these stars on the plot, so left is the 13 atom cluster again. The stars represent different crystal structures that the bulk material can have, so FCC, HCP, and PCC. And rhodium, specifically in a bulk form, it has a FCC structure. But as you can see, our clusters, these data points here, they represent the data from the molecular dynamics simulations. So our data points do not indicate that our cluster would have a clear FCC structure. It's most similar to FCC, but it's not clearly the FCC. So it's if you look at the zero Q values, that would mean that we would have a liquid. So on the top bottom left corner, if the data points are there, it means our material is liquid. So our clusters are somewhat amorphous or liquid-like based on this analysis. The other interesting thing what this analysis shows is that how the structure evolves with time. So the blue dots, they indicate the structure at the beginning of the simulation after we remove the first 2 picoseconds, and it shows how it behaves with time. So with 13 and 19 atom clusters, we see some evolution with time, whereas the 43 atom cluster remains pretty same over the simulation time, which is also visible if we make a movie out of our structures. But this is only the beginning of our analysis, and what we actually want to do is to really compare the structures that we have obtained from the molecular dynamics simulations to those that we previously obtained with the genetic algorithm analysis with the CISU Grand Challenge project. And for that comparison, because if you look at them by eye, it's really difficult to see whether they are similar or not. We are now developing further analysis based on machine learning type of descriptors, and in order, so the goal is really to understand that under the reaction conditions, so at high temperature, how many different conformations the clusters can have, and how when we study the reactions, so when we look at certain chemical conversion, how many different structures we actually should include to those studies, and how much does it cost to convert one structure to another one. And luckily we have this extensive database from the CISU Grand Challenge project to compare with. And this comparison includes quite a lot of data. So now we are developing the analysis softwares and tools using an online Binder notebook system, so that all the researchers involved in the project can run the analysis in a very similar way. So yes, this was only possible, this project, because of the MAHTI. So without this very nice resources, we would have never done this. And our user experience, it was really fantastic. I mean, we could start immediately when MAHTI was opened. And this was thanks and due to Jussi Enkovaara, who did some preliminary testing of GPO and also gave some optimization tips for us. Also, we ran this kind of molecular dynamic simulations when we were doing a Puhti pilot a year ago. So we knew that we had all the scripts ready whenever MAHTI is opened. And what people running these simulations found particularly useful was also this rocket chat, because there you could quickly ask help when you had a small problems. But in general, we didn't have many problems. So this went very, very well. So we are very, very happy. And these are the people who have been running the calculations, and including it includes PhD students, postdocs, and university lecturer. And so we are very, very grateful for computer time and technical support from CSC and the funding from the Academy of Finland and the University of Jyväskylä. And I'd like to thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take questions if you have any.
Thank you, Karolina. Interesting presentation again. I personally come from the Department of Chemistry from Jyväskylä, so it's always close to my heart. But how much on the simulations, how quickly you can move those catalytic research to industry, and what are the potential savings for the chemical industry? Do you have the estimates on importance of the calculation on that side?
These cluster type of catalysts, they are not used in industry yet. But industry is interested in understanding typically the reaction mechanisms and determine what are the critical steps for reaction to run. And as a matter of fact, I'm running a project together with one big Finnish industrial company where we specifically directly use DFT to explain the activity of the material for the chemistry that they are interested in. So it can be one-to-one, I can say. For these clusters, to use them in real catalysis, the challenge is that they are very small, these clusters, and under the reaction conditions, they tend to agglomerate to the bigger metal particles. And then they lose these specific properties that they have when they are distributed over the support with containing only few atoms. So, but people are working towards this direction. So we do need lots of basic research, and then hopefully one day there will be practical applications in industry where you can use this kind of systems.
Thank you. So now we have heard all interesting presentations, and we have still time for question and answers and discussion. I'm thinking if we somehow could also open that participants could easily ask direct questions or comment on today's seminar. We had almost 180 participants on the Zoom and 20 in the YouTube. So it's been a quite remarkable audience for the event. It's clear that people see it important and interesting. This HPC type of conferences where you present scientific achievements from the very different fields of science is always a bit demanding, but it's also very eye-opening moment to see what all fields of society are dependent on HPC computing. That we know, but it's always good to bring it for the bigger audience also. So there's now some time. Let's see if questions start popping up, and then we also can start opening the bottles and raising some toast for the bright future of the MAHTI. And of course, if you are well prepared with your drink, so I propose also that all of you would then open the camera and toast together with each other.
You can open it even if you wouldn't have a drink.
Yeah. Even then, but. Okay. No further questions. It doesn't surprise because we are in Finland, but in any case, I think we had a really interesting seminar here in Zoom. I'd really like to be able to offer opportunity to come to Kajaani in person, because the discussions when people met person are of course so much more fruitful. But thank you for all the presenters for very well prepared presentations, interesting stories. Thank you for all participants. I hope you learned a lot about the HPC, and thank you for ministry and vendor representatives. It's been a great seminar, and all the good for MAHTI and science it produces. Cheers.
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 Thank you.
Yes, and of course it's a bit weird that we are here drinking some sparkling, and that was not necessarily, but I really hope that we have a possibility to do it together also in the future, and I'm sure about it. So, and if you are close to the Keilaranta, then just take a walk here. So there's half a bottle still left. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to all the users making great science on the machines.
Thank you.
Okay. There's one thing that there is one hand. Reason is there. Evert.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Okay, Evert, now you are allowed to speak.
Because I was trying to open my video here, but I was not able to do so. That's the reason why I raised the hand, Pekka.
Oh.
Because I have.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, we were almost thinking that somebody would have a question. Or what? comment.
No, Evertin pitää uudelleen unmutetta. Evert, you can unmute yourself now and you can also...
Now we can see you.
Yeah.
Yeah, now you can see me. So
good.
toast here. And enjoy the system for many years. Huh?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Evan.
Sirpa can also talk.
Yeah.
Needed.
Sirpa, you have hand raising.
Please, Sirpa, go ahead if you have a question.
No, sorry, I was just clicking. I think, I thought also that maybe we could show video everybody with a champagne glass or something, but it was not possible. But cheers to Mahti.
Yes,
Yeah,
okay.
we have actually a video. We will start soon rolling on as a sign of the ending the ceremony.
And from Zoom, if you want to see many people at once, click on the view button on the top right and choose gallery view. Then you can see multiple speakers at the same time.
Yeah. But anyway, I think we are done now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's put the video rolling and
Okay.
thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For